It started as a normal morning, or at least as normal as mornings ever were in that house. My alarm went off before the sun was even up, and I dragged myself out of bed, knowing that if I was late getting breakfast ready, my father would remind me of every failure I'd ever made. I tiptoed downstairs, keeping quiet because even the sound of footsteps too loud could set him off. My hands were already trembling as I took the milk out of the fridge, poured it into the cup, and prayed to God that I wouldn't make a mistake today. The kitchen felt like a war zone that morning. My father sat at the table with his newspaper, grunting about how no one in this house knew how to do anything right. My mother leaned against the counter scrolling on her phone, throwing me a glare every now and then as if my very existence annoyed her. I swallowed hard, tried to keep my head down, and moved slowly, carefully. But even my best wasn't enough. The carton tilted just a little too much, a few drops of milk slipped over the rim of his cup, and I froze, knowing what was coming before he even looked up. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. What the hell is wrong with you? His voice boomed, sharp and angry, making my heart jump into my throat. Can you do one thing without screwing it up? I'm sorry, I whispered instantly, grabbing a cloth to wipe the table, my voice shaky. I didn't even look at him. Looking at him made it worse. But he wasn't satisfied with my apology. He never was. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the cups, and in a flash, he was out of his chair. My mother snickered behind him like this was a show she'd seen before and enjoyed every time. My father grabbed the kettle sitting on the stove, steam still rising from its spout. My stomach dropped, and I backed away, hands raised, begging, "Please, I'll clean it up. It was an accident." "Accident?" he spat, stepping closer, his face twisted in disgust. "You've been an accident since the day you were born. Maybe pain will finally teach you not to waste what little you're given." Before I could react, before my brain even caught up to what was happening, he tilted the kettle and boiling tea poured down on my hands. The pain was instant and unbearable. I screamed, a sound I didn't even recognize as my own, clutching my hands as tears blurred my vision. My skin felt like it was on fire, the sting so sharp it stole my breath away. I stumbled backward, bumping into the counter, shaking uncontrollably, sobbing as I tried to escape the heat still searing my skin. And then I heard it. Laughter. My mother's laughter. She didn't even glance at my hands, didn't move to help me. She just sipped her tea and said casually, "Pain will teach clumsy, useless hands. Maybe next time she'll learn." Their laughter filled the kitchen, sharp and cruel, as I sank to the floor, shaking, my hands red and blistering, my heart breaking into a million pieces. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to stop existing just so I wouldn't have to feel that pain. Not the burn, but the pain of knowing that the two people who were supposed to love me only knew how to hurt me. That night, I sat alone in my room, hands wrapped in damp cloths, tears silently sliding down my cheeks. I stared at the ceiling, feeling hollow. I replayed every word, every look, every time they had told me I was useless, clumsy, an accident. But this time, something different settled in my chest. Something I had never felt before. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I wasn't even just angry. I was done. Done begging for kindness. Done apologizing for existing. Done letting them hold power over me just because they gave me life. They thought pain was a lesson. They thought burning my hands would make me obedient forever. But they had taught me something else entirely. That one day, when I had the strength, I would take away everything they used to make me feel small. I whispered to myself as I stared at my scarred hands. You want to teach lessons with pain? Fine. One day you'll learn your own, and it won't be with fire, it'll be with loss. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of their next outburst. I wasn't afraid of them at all. I was planning for the day they'd look at me and realize their reign of cruelty had ended. A day where they'd feel the weight of everything they had poured onto me, not through screams or burns, but through the emptiness of having no one left to hurt. I clenched my fists slowly, ignoring the sting. These hands might have been useless to them, but one day they'd be strong enough to take away everything they loved holding over me. The burns on my hands were healing, but the damage they'd done to my heart felt permanent. Every time I flexed my fingers, every time the skin tightened under the healing scabs, I could still hear my father's voice telling me I was an accident, my mother's laughter echoing as she sipped her tea and watched me writhe in pain. The kitchen had become a battlefield where they'd won every war, leaving me scarred inside and out. But for the first time in my life, a fire burned inside me hotter than anything they'd ever poured on my skin, a fire they couldn't put out. I started seeing things more clearly after that day. Every insult, every threat, every cruel joke wasn't just about me being clumsy or useless. It was about control. They wanted to remind me at every turn that my life belonged to them, that I had no right to safety, kindness, or love. But I had learned something new in that moment on the kitchen floor. Pain doesn't make you obedient. Pain makes you dangerous once you've got nothing left to lose. The days went on as if nothing had happened. My father still barked orders. My mother still rolled her eyes and called me worthless, but they didn't realize I was watching now, really watching. I noticed how my father strutted around in front of the neighbors, pretending to be a good, honorable man, offering fake smiles while bragging about raising his daughter right. I saw how my mother clung to her little circle of church friends, telling them about how strict but loving our home was, how grateful I should be to have such discipline. They lived for appearances, and the power they had over me only existed because no one saw the truth. But revenge wasn't going to be as simple as exposing them, not this time. I wasn't going to give them the easy excuse of calling me a liar or a bitter child. My revenge had to be something they couldn't talk their way out of, something they would feel deep in their bones, the same way I felt their teeth scorching my skin. They needed to know what it was like to have their hands become useless, just as they said mine were. They needed to understand what it felt like to lose control, to beg for help, and have no one offer it, just as they had abandoned me. So I began to plan quietly. I didn't lash out. I didn't argue. I made myself small, invisible, just enough to keep them from noticing the way I was collecting their secrets, the unpaid bills they thought I didn't know about, the way my father borrowed money from people in town, promising to pay them back while gambling it away. The quiet desperation in my mother's late-night calls to friends, begging for favors while pretending to be above everyone. They were crumbling already. They just didn't know I was watching every crack appear. And I kept working on myself in silence, saving every dollar from side jobs they didn't know I had, building connections outside that toxic house, finding people who saw me for more than the broken girl my parents tried to make me believe I was. Every scar on my hands reminded me why I was doing this, not just to escape, but to make sure that one day they wouldn't be able to lift a finger without remembering the pain they caused me. There was one night, long after they had gone to bed, when I sat in the kitchen alone, staring at the kettle they had used to burn me. My reflection stared back from its shiny surface, no longer the frightened girl they loved to bully. I reached out and traced it with my fingertips, whispering to myself, "One day you'll know what it's like to have nothing left to hold. One day the world won't fear you. It'll forget you." My plan wasn't ready yet, but every move I made from that moment on was deliberate. Every favor I earned, every ally I found, every thread of their false empire I slowly pulled free was one step closer to their fall. This wasn't about running anymore. This wasn't about surviving. This was about turning every ounce of agony they gave me into power they'd never get back. And when the time came, they wouldn't just lose their masks, their lies, their control. They'd lose the one thing they cherished more than anything, the ability to use their hands to hurt, to control, to grip the world like it owed them obedience. Just like they had made me feel small and powerless, one day they would stand in front of me with their own hands outstretched, shaking, desperate for mercy they would never receive. I wasn't done planning. I wasn't done building my life beyond theirs. But deep down, I already knew what was coming. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice. And when I served it, it would burn longer than any tea they'd ever poured on me. Years passed, but my vow never faded. My parents thought I had left for good and would eventually crawl back, begging for scraps like they always said I would. Instead, I built a life they never imagined I was capable of, a life on my own terms, surrounded by people who saw me as human, not as a mistake. But every scar on my hands reminded me of their words, of the boiling tea, of my mother's laugh. They once said pain would teach me. Now it was my turn to teach them what it truly meant to hurt. When the time came, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, deliberate, the way they had taught me to move in their house to avoid punishment. Except this time, I wasn't avoiding anything. I was leading them exactly where I wanted them. Their perfect life had crumbled over the years without me lifting a finger. My father's debts had piled so high he'd lost his business. My mother's social circle had vanished the moment whispers of their cruelty leaked out. But even stripped of power and friends, they clung to their house like it was their last piece of control, a roof they believed would always protect them, even after everything they had done. I became their landlord. They didn't know it at first. Through a chain of property deals and silent arrangements, I ended up owning the very house they once ruled like a throne. I signed the paperwork with a calm satisfaction, knowing that the walls that had witnessed my pain now belonged to me, and with ownership came choice. I let them stay. For a while. I didn't storm in or scream at them. I wanted them to think they were safe. Weeks turned into months, their lives slowly unraveling further, bills going unpaid, cupboards growing empty. I watched from a distance as the people who once mocked me for every small mistake made bigger ones of their own. But now there was no one to clean up after them, no child to blame, no scapegoat to carry their shame. Finally, one rainy evening, I arrived at their door. They looked smaller somehow. My father's once booming presence had faded to a slumped figure in an old chair, my mother's smug face now lined with exhaustion. They hadn't expected me, but desperation made them let me in. "We just need more time," my father muttered, avoiding my eyes. "Things have been hard." I looked around at the house that had been my prison once, the same kitchen where they'd laughed as boiling tea scorched my skin. My hands, healed but scarred, rested on the table. I let the silence stretch until it was heavy enough to make them shift uncomfortably. "You told me my hands were useless," I said finally, my voice steady, cold. "You burned me to teach me a lesson. Do you remember that?" Neither of them spoke. My mother's lips pressed thin, my father's jaw tightened. "Well," I continued, leaning forward, "these useless hands own this house now. These hands built a life you can't touch, a life you'll never be part of. And starting tonight, these hands are taking back every inch of space you once used to hurt me." Confusion flashed across their faces, followed quickly by fear. "You can't," my father started, but I cut him off. "I can. You're no longer welcome here. You taught me what it felt like to have nowhere to go. You made me and a frightened child version of myself sit outside in pain while you laughed inside a warm home. Tonight, you're going to learn what that feels like." I stood, heading to the door, but paused long enough to look them in the eye one last time. "Pack whatever your clumsy, useless hands can carry. By midnight, this won't be your shelter anymore. You wanted to teach lessons with pain? Let this be the last one you ever learn." Hours later, I returned to find them on the curb, bags at their feet, rain soaking through their clothes. They didn't meet my gaze. My father's proud shoulders were hunched. My mother's hands trembled as she clutched a torn bag. They looked exactly the way they once made me feel, small, powerless, unwanted. I walked past them without a word, into the house that no longer held their cruelty. For the first time in my life, the kitchen didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like freedom. I boiled a kettle of tea for myself, poured it slowly into a cup, and sat in silence, knowing that the hands they once called useless had finally taken back everything they stole and left them with nothing but the cold lesson they deserved. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.